Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything Pistons, and news writer for Sports Illustrated.
And guys, we could not be more excited, so we got a special show for you all. We have the Detroit Bad Boys cap expert, our resident, our own kind of like, Detroit-focused, almost Keith Smith type guy, right? With Kyle Metz here. That's at Kyle Metz 23. Now, obviously, I'm not comparing you one-to-one to Keith, who's also awesome and great friend of the show of the Pistons Pulse. But Kyle, man, we are pumped to have you here. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's exciting to be here, and I miss getting to do stuff with Wes all the time. So this is a lot of fun. But yeah, Keith Smith is amazing. Yeah. Keith Smith is amazing too. Love him. Make sure you're following him. He's got all the greatest. But I try my best to give us a little Piston specific flavor. There's some things that, why shop national when you can buy local? You know what I'm saying? Like
exactly. I mean, and we were all taking care of or taking advantage of that in the DBP Slack earlier today, talking about all sorts of things the Pistons could do with the TPE. So I guess that's just a good place to start, right? So the Pistons obviously have the more traditional routes available to them with trading players or trading draft picks to get some salary back or get a player back. But they also have this thing called a traded player exception. So it's probably a good place to start, Kyle. Like, can you just give the listeners a deep dive on how that works and what options that opens up for the team?
Yeah, so they have a traded player exception that they got from when they signed and traded Dennis Schroeder to the Kings. So he signed and traded for the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. And that was $14.1 million. And so they sent him out without taking any salary back. So that means they got a TPE for $14.1 million. If you want to get really nerdy, it's $14,104,000. And then I'll get to a second what the actual number is for them. But that means between now and July 7th of 2026, they have that on the books they can use to bring in salary without having to send anything out. And the Pistons are well below any luxury tax or apron, so they can use that full amount without really worrying about any of those things. And the way those work is that means they can trade for any number of players, both in one transaction or over the course of many between now and July 7th. Whose combined salaries are equal to or less than $14,354,000. There's an extra $250,000 buffer they get on top of that TPE. So that's where that number's coming from. And so that gives them many options to work with, including players like Bobby Portis, for example, or Herb Jones. Like those are all guys that are in that range where they could easily take in. Kobe White. Are some names of guys that they could bring in without having to send any salary out. They still need the roster spots, and so they have to cut someone if they don't send any people out. But we can talk about some of those mechanics later. But that's the idea. It's a really powerful thing to have. They can eat salary too for teams like to facilitate a Giannis trade. Like there's things they can get involved and get players back that way without having to really send anything out.
I have a TPE question that I'm going to take advantage of you here for that. So a lot of teams have TPEs and some of them are more incentivized to use them because I believe they expire like a year from when they occur. So say the Pistons were making a trade with Utah, just totally hypothetical. The Pistons aren't going to make a Lauri Markkanen trade, but Utah has a very healthy TPE for John Collins that doesn't expire right away. But say those two teams were only in the deal. If the Pistons send a player out, could Utah absorb that player into the TPE while Detroit also does the same in the same deal? Or does it not work that way?
No, that's a great question. So the thing with NBA trades, and it's kind of weird, but each team can structure any deal whichever way is best for them as long as it's legal. And so if for example, let's say they want to send out a player, like let's say they want to send LeVert into Utah's TPE. From the Pistons perspective, we're just sending LeVert out for Spee and who else, right? So it doesn't really matter. But like they can for the Pistons side, it's just, and let's say they bring back a guy who has enough like salary to fit into their TPE. Let's say he makes $9 million. Okay. So they send a player out, they send LeVert out, and they bring back a player who makes $9 million. They could either view it as a simultaneous trade where LeVert goes out and they're using LeVert's salary to take back the $9 million, and that works great. Or they could say, we're going to send LeVert out. We're going to take the $9 million into the TPE we currently have and create a new TPE for the same amount of LeVert's salary, because he also was signed with a non-taxpayer mid-level. So it would restart the clock. So then they would have another $14 million TPE that will last until next February. And then they would also have about $5 million left on the current TPE that expires in July. So the Pistons could do something like that if they wanted to.
Got it. That makes sense. And would you say that teams that have TPEs that are set to expire before the deadline or right at the deadline, would you say that it's probably dependent on team context, but are they incentivized to use those before they lose them? Or is there not really a rush because obviously you're bringing a player in that is going to stay on your cap sheet for as long as his deal goes until?
I think it's really dependent on the team's situation. I would say the Pistons are in a position where they're incentivized to use it because it's a salary block that they have access to that they may not have access to later. Now, They still have LeVert in pocket. They still have LeVert's salary on next book, so they can use him similarly the same way. He becomes an expiring next year, so it could mitigate their need to use it. And I would say most teams will only use it if they have a guy that they actually want. Most teams don't use it just to use it. That's why a lot of them end up going unused. It's a good tool to have, but it's not like punishing for most teams to not use it. So that's how I would answer, but it kind of depends on context.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's super helpful. See, we're all learning here. I love it.
All right, one more thing just on that TPE, and then we'll move on to some other just context stuff with Detroit here. But like the one question I've had with that, so you said it's 14 mil and some change, right? Is that the maximum that Detroit can take back in salary, or is there kind of buffer above that as well? Because like if you trade out a salary, you could take back some salary above what you sent out to a certain percentage. Is that the same deal there, or is it kind of a hard cap?
It's more of a hard cap, but that's where that $250,000. It's a set buffer. It used to be $100,000. So if anyone who's been tracking a while, it's actually in the more current CBA, they upped it to $250,000. So that's where you get that 14.35 number rather than 14.1. So that's what that is.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So last thing before we get into your guys' questions and mock trades, and we'll try to get through as many of those as we can. If you guys are tuning in with us live, make sure you're putting those into the live chat. We're going to try to hit on as many as possible. But just Kyle, from your perspective with the tools in the toolkit that the Pistons have available to them, what are you kind of expecting to see, or at least where does the incentive really line up for Detroit? Like, is this more of a quiet deadline? Do you think that with the TPE, with some movable salaries, maybe the stars are aligning where it makes a lot of sense for Detroit to make a move, or maybe even a bigger move? Like, where do you really see the incentive pointing for Detroit here?
Yeah, I think I'll say it this way. What I think they should be incentivized to do is a little different than what everything we've heard from the front office, right? And the beat writers and the national guys. Like, it's pretty clear that Trajan really wants to give the core of this team, the way it's currently constructed, an opportunity to see what they can do in the playoffs. I think not having Ivy and not having Stu for last year's playoff run made them feel like we really don't know what the ceiling of this team is without those guys really in their full role. I'm looking into Ivy in a little bit, but especially Stu, right? Like you didn't have one of the best defenders in the league playing against a guy that they really could have used him. Like I think everyone in the building believes it would have gone differently, and they really want to see what they have. And it makes sense to not push chips in until you really know what you need, right? Because the playoffs really could show you, like we talk about, do they need a shooter? Do they need a playmaker? Do they need a guy who can kind of shoot but plays defense still, or do they need a high volume variance guy next to Duncan? So it's not, like those are all questions that you could make an argument for any one of those needs. And so getting another playoff run under their belt at full strength, I think is where they want to go. And it's the safest route, frankly, for Trajan, because then he's not having to stake his claim on any guy right now. So I don't blame him. I do think when we look at the team as fans, and I'm sure Trajan sees this too, but we see a team that's good, but has noticeable, obvious holes, and has very exploitable weaknesses. I know I'm getting in it all day on Twitter because I said they're not playoff good yet. I didn't mean they were terrible. I didn't mean they weren't going to win games. I'm not even saying they won't win a series currently constructed, but to think that they are the odds-on favorite as currently constructed to get out of the East is more of a statement about where the other teams in the East are rather than the eliteness of this team in itself, in my opinion. And I think they have room right now. Right now, they're projected to be $30 million under the luxury tax next summer. That's including Duran's extension. About, let's say he gets like at least $38 million around there. You're talking in the first year of his new contract. That's about $30 million out of the tax. And that's assuming you're not holding Ivy's capital to $30 million. That means you're letting go of Tobias's capital, but everyone else is staying. That is able to stay. I'm assuming you can bring back Tobias on a minimum, right? Let's say you get a guy at the deadline for $14 million. Now we're talking $15 million under the tax to bring back 2 or 3 guys. We got Danis who needs to be brought in as well, so he's going to get converted. So depending on what his contract could be, like these are all things. That, yeah, for sure. I agree with that. That's fine. I'm not big time enough for people to actually care what I think. So, but yeah, you know what I mean? So like with Danis coming back, there are other things the team needs to do. And so I'm kind of smattering and I'm kind of going all over the place, but that's where I think personally they do need to make a move. I think using the TPE would be really helpful, or using Levert's salary to bring in someone in that $20 million range, because that's about what it is. They can bring up to like $21 million, I think, off of Levert's salary in that range. And so I think it makes sense to do that. And so I think that's more likely what they're going to do rather than making a swing for a big name guy, because that's everything they're saying.
Yeah, it's such an interesting position that the Pistons are in now, because you overperform more than anyone could have thought they were going to, and you have all your draft picks in your cupboard, and those are getting less valuable now that the team is good, but teams are still certainly going to be interested in acquiring first round picks. But you see how much it takes to let go 1 first round pick, let alone 4. So the Pistons can really do whatever they want to do, but I'm with you. I don't see them making a big swing, but maybe having a similar deadline to last year where you acquire Dennis Schroeder for next to nothing, and he's a big piece that helps you through the rest of the season and into the playoffs. So let's get into some of those deals. We had one here submitted to us by Richard Sunley, I believe in the DBB comments, but he
this
proposed.
was Twitter, and you stole this from me. I was hoping you'd leave this one because Jalen Smith's my dude. You're good. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's why I bring this one up, because I think we all collectively have been talking about Jalen Smith a little bit, and especially even today in the DBB Slack. So Richard Sunley suggests that the Pistons acquired Jalen Smith and Malik Monk. They send out Karis LeVert to the Kings, and I believe Isaac Jones is included in that deal as well. And then the Bulls get Bobby Klintman. I'm sure that some sort of draft picks, potentially, whether they're seconds or not, have to be sent out. But what would you think of this move, as the Pistons not really giving up? I mean, Karis LeVert, we've talked about him at length. He's been up and down at times, but he is a huge asset on the trade market and could help this team improve their roster. So kind Kyle, why don't you start us off? What would you think about this deal, and even if it was the only deal the Pistons make over the deadline?
Yeah, I'll talk from the Pistons perspective first, and then I'll get to the other teams. From a Pistons standpoint, like Jalen Smith's a great option. I think he's going to be a lot more expensive than what this deal lines out. So I think Jalen Smith is a guy that could fit a need in terms of a shooter, a big man shooter who can hit from above the break, some things like that, with noticeable holes like in the offense. And he could potentially become a starting forward depending on how he develops, but most likely is a high-level backup at this point. I think the Malik Monk stuff, let's talk about Malik Monk. I think there's a lot of things that Malik Monk does that could be helpful for this team, for sure. And I've maintained that I have a hard time seeing Trajan trading for him at this point because he very clearly did not want him in the offseason. He didn't want that contract. They could have had him for free in the Schroeder trade, and they chose to take the TPE instead. Okay. So that should tell us something. Now, it's a different day than it was, like, as I'll borrow Keith Smith, today is not the same day as it was earlier, right? The draft day quote, whatever it is, I'm butchering it. But, we've seen more of Ivy. Ivy has not lived up to, or is not, at least right now, able to carry the position that the team needs him to, or what they thought he might be. I think they were giving him runway to do that, and it just hasn't been that. And so they might be more incentivized to bring Malik Monk in. But that's just hard to say. And in this deal in particular, you're sending one guard out and you're getting another one back. It doesn't solve your guard problem. Like, there's too many guards on the team right now. And so I think in this deal in particular, instead of sending Klintman out, you send Sasser out for the value or something like that. Like, you have to kind of balance the roster a little better, or there would have to be another move here where you are sending Ivy out and somebody else. Because this is basically saying Ivy's not the guy. Because they're not going to re-sign Ivy for a multiple-year deal while also having Monk at $18 million apiece and Duncan. Like, I just don't see that happening. And so I don't love this deal for Detroit because it doesn't scratch some of the itch in terms of the roster construction. But the two players in themselves in a vacuum would be great adds for sure. As for the other teams, I don't think the Bulls do it. And I don't see any reason to send Klintman out right now. He has no value, and he's a non-guaranteed contract. You don't need to send Klintman out in that deal. Just send another second, like, frankly. And I don't know if even the Kings are fine because they're getting off of Malik, but they probably want to try to do some other things with that. So I would say it's not the strongest. I can see why the Pistons might do it, but I don't love it.
So we could kind of like use this to pivot into another Kings guard that Pistons fans seem to be interested in, and that would be Keon Ellis, right? And he's obviously on a much smaller deal, so I'd be curious to get kind of your perspective on how a contract as small as his could work for the Pistons, because, unless you're sending out someone like a Bobby Klintman, it's kind of tough to get that small of a matching salary. But before we do that, you mentioned kind of the roster balance thing. And this is something I've been finding really interesting. So even in our chat, right, when we've been getting mock trades, and for the Pistons Pulse too, when we're getting fan mock trades, it's like it seems like there's a lot of guards that fans are targeting right now. And I get it, because the guards are usually the best shooters. But you look at this Pistons team, and you said it, like, they have a ton of guards and they don't have a lot of bigs, which is kind of why I've been a little interested in, say, a Jalen Smith, or we've got a Bobby Portis question. We'll get into that too. But, are you kind of seeing the same thing where maybe the real goal of this deadline, not only to like add shooting or maybe add ball handling, but also just to maybe balance out the roster a little bit, get a little more help in the front court rather than adding to the back court? Is that something you're seeing?
Yeah, I think part of it is because the price of a forward is astronomically more expensive than getting a guard. There's a lot of those scoring guard archetypes that are low value right now. They're literally giving Monk away, and he's a good player, right? They're literally like, we'll attach Monk. We'll let you have Monk so you can have Keon. Like, Keon's the goal. And it's like, well, you have to take Monk too, which frankly, I would do a deal that revolved around that and use, I would get into that later. But like, I think that's why. I think people are seeing the market for guards, and it's a lot easier to do that. And a lot of them fit into the TPE, right? We're talking Kobe White, Ayu DeSumo, to name a few, are maybe more easily gettable in the eyes for most people. Because it's true. Forwards who can shoot and like good wing defenders, like those are people don't trade those, right? You're seeing New Orleans Pelicans. You need to give us 4 first-round picks and a swap to get Herb Jones, right? Like he's not worth that, but someone might pay it because they did for Mikal Bridges. They've done it for Bane, like, so I think that's kind of why people are leaning towards that, because it feels safer. And they're not going to get ripped to shreds and be like, well, why do you think they'd give up that guy for 3 first-round picks, right? I think there's part of that. And we've been sold Ivy and Cade, the backcourt of the future. Like Ivy's the perfect complement. He's the scorer. He can shoot. Like, he's okay on defense. Like, so we've been told like they need a secondary scorer, which I think I agree with. Usually that's easier to find in a guard than, again, if you have a high scoring 4, it's hard to get a hold of those guys like Lauri Markkanen, for example. So I think that's why you're seeing a propensity to lean towards that. But I agree. I think it would be better to build an offense around Cade and then a 4 that can score than another guard, because then switching becomes, you get more mismatches easier when you're having those as a 2-man game than say 2 guards, right? And that's part of what the Celtics were running into for a while with Tatum and Brown was it was the same guy could guard both of them, and so they had to figure out a different offense of flow to make that work. So again, that's kind of in the weeds, but I think that's why. But I would love to see them get a 4, and I think that's a bigger need long term. But I see why the guards are popular right now at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think the Malik Monk, Keon Ellis package would make more sense for a team like the Warriors if there's nothing else that they can do, because Jimmy Butler goes down. You have this Jonathan Kuminga situation where maybe the Kings take him on. So the Warriors take Monk and see what happens there. And the Warriors are trying to do just compete at any level when your second star goes down and you're trying to capitalize on what's left of Steph Curry. So I'm with you that I think the Malik Monk, Keon Ellis package, we might see it get moved potentially to the same team at the deadline. I just don't think that team would be the Pistons.
All right, we got another. Well, in reality, this would probably be a TPE trade, but I loved the phrasing of the questions. This is Rogue Blue. It says half a bottle of Blue Powerade for Dalton Connect. What would you think of Dalton Connect, and then how could the Pistons theoretically appeal to the Lakers to get him in? Because it is true he's not looked like the same guy since that Mark Williams fiasco at last year's deadline. So maybe we rescue Dalton.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be very cheap to do so. He has no value at this point. So, people aren't going to like this, but that might be an Ivy kind of challenge trade situation where if the Lakers are like, hey, we need someone and we can re-sign Ivy for relatively cheap. We don't, again, and maybe Ivy, go on over there. So that's, again, that I think everyone will hate to hear that, but maybe the Pistons entertain that, but they haven't seen a lot from Dalton anyway. So I don't know if that's something that would interest the Pistons because he hasn't exactly been, we just haven't seen anything from him. So I think for a team that's trying to compete, this is like a Troy Weaver Pistons move that might happen, where you have 20 minutes now, you can throw them in and just see what happens. But there's guys who are really good that can't get minutes right now because JB doesn't trust them to close on a team that's first in the East, right? So we've got to aim a little higher here. And I'll just use this as a moment to talk to we should all be happy because of the first in the East and just enjoy the ride and we shouldn't break up the vibes and we shouldn't make any moves because they're the bar has changed, right? They are overachieving. But it would be a disappointment if they don't get out of the first round. It would be a disappointment if they don't at least go to 7 games in the second round, in my opinion, where they're at now. Okay. I think that's a reasonable thing to think that might happen, but we don't need to settle for, because we came in with the year that we just need to win a playoff series like that. There should not be the bar at this point with where they're at. And so Trajan acting in a way and making moves to fill the holes to give them a chance to push into the conference finals, I think is important. So that's my other stance on that.
Yeah, and I thought like when the Dalton Connect thing came up, my mind went to Ivy as well. Like maybe the Lakers would be interested in him. I mean, they have Luca and Austin Reeves, obviously, but that's not the healthiest bunch of the two. And obviously, you have Marcus Smart there as well. But maybe they're interested for like a depth piece. And I don't know if that's a return that the Pistons would be okay with for Ivy. So maybe both sides want to see what else is out there before they make that deal. But I mean, yeah, if that's like the shooting you can add and you can get it fairly cheap, why not? I mean, YouTube users bringing up Connect's defense in the chat, which is definitely a fair point, especially when you have Duncan Robinson on the team, like you mentioned. But yeah, to add some additional shooting to help you during the playoffs, I mean, could only help those like offensive lulls that sometimes happen.
All right. So since we've been talking about Jaden Ivey here, we've gotten a couple like just check in, I guess you might say, on Ivy. So unnamed YouTube user says that you, Kyle, were on another podcast and commented on Ivy's value, seemed pretty low on his value. Do you think that with his qualifying offer being 8 to 10 million, is his value low enough to not even qualify him? El Blusa says, what is the Ivy problem? YouTube user again mentions that there could be some difficulty with Ivy's trade value in the offseason if they were thinking about a sign and trade. So like, let's just do the outsider perspective for a second, right? If you're another team and you're looking at Jaden Ivey right now in Detroit, are you thinking that he's a big asset? Are you thinking this is a buy low candidate? Like, where is he trade value wise? And then what does that mean for Detroit as maybe they're looking to either improve or, make a change at that position?
Yeah, I think externally he's a buy low, second draft kind of guy. And he's a guy that is expiring. You can't, like, if you trade for him now, you'll have his bird rights to re-sign him, and he would be a restricted free agent, so you maintain control. And so if he's a guy you're interested in, yeah, I think he's a buy low. He's not going to have value in the sense of like you're not getting a first round pick for him. Like he's probably just salary filler for most people. Now, he might, if someone has a TPE they need to use and they have a roster spot open or they have a need at guard, which not a lot of teams do, frankly. You know what I mean? Like that's something where it's like, here's a second round pick and we'll take him off your hands. So you don't have to deal with it. And I know you like, that's the kind of situation. He is a guy, he was a fifth overall pick. Like he did have elite athleticism and you could very easily convince yourself he's just still getting his legs back and he's improved a ton as a shooter. So at the very least, like you can help him, give him space to develop into that role to be more of a volume shooter. I can see a team talking themselves into him as a buy low candidate for sure. But that's kind of the extent of what he is, in my opinion, right? From everything that I'm hearing, seeing, just getting the vibes, like I don't think the Pistons have plans to re-sign him or to really even, tendering him a qualifying offer is a $30 million cap hold on your books. And he doesn't have to, it's like he's going to wait to see if he gets any offers, like all that's like, it's a whole process, right? And then if he signs that, he has a no trade clause and it's a 1-year expiring deal and he becomes an unrestricted free agent. And so all of that said, like if you can get anything from now, and partly I think just to do right by him, I think there's an interest to like, hey, we love you. We don't have a spot for you right now. And we've moved on in terms of where we're at in terms of the life stage of development of our team. And he's just kind of not congruent with that. Like he kind of got left behind, not anyone's fault, but just he doesn't fit where they're at right now, what they need. And so I think to do right by him, I think they're interested in moving him to a place that maybe can use him and give him a chance to really compete. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I was struggling with like it would make sense to move on from Ivy, but will Trajan be okay with whatever that return is? Because we don't think it's going to be some extraordinary package, but when you bring in the context of like the cap hold and the no trade clause and everything, I could see how it would make sense for both sides for a deal sooner rather than later to make sense, and obviously give Ivy some additional time to get used to a new situation and have that other team, wherever he potentially goes, figure out how he does or does not fit into their long-term future. So yeah, I mean, I could see like an Ivy deal happening and the fan base being very underwhelmed by it, but like when you consider all those factors, I think like that's how you would explain that in that moment.
Right. And if you guys remember, I mean, Killian had no market and then got cut right after the trade deadline.
Yeah.
What, last year, 2 years ago, whatever it was.
Mhm.
So where Ivy is now, I think he's shown a little more than Killian did over the course of his career, but how much more? And we have, do I think they'll cut him after the trade deadline? I think they might do if he doesn't want to be there. If he's like, hey, this isn't working and I'm not getting minutes. If you don't have a trade for me, can you let me go latch on with somebody else? Like that's a very real thing we're talking about because he has no trade value after the deadline because he's a free agent. So like a sign and trade maybe, but even then that's just going to be salary matching things. And that's sign and trades are really complex in terms of how much you can actually get with that. And so I would not be surprised. I don't think that's a good use. I'm not saying that it will, but I would not be surprised if he doesn't get moved. I think he'll have more of a trade market than Killian did. But if he doesn't, I think Ivy might say, hey, can you cut me loose? And I don't know that it doesn't benefit them to let him go. From if we're all worried about vibes and not breaking things up because of a trade, like a guy who's unhappy with his role, who's got messy restricted free agency coming up, like you may just not want to deal with that, especially if you don't think you see him in the long-term plans. So that's just my, I'm not sure that's necessarily, but that's what I get the sense of.
All right, so we got kind of a 2-for-1 here. This is Cash Money 99 in the live comments. Says this is 2 trades. So Bobby Portis for 2 seconds. So Bobby Portis then essentially coming into that traded player exception. And then Norman Powell for Karis LeVert, Marcus Sasser, and a first-round pick. His logic there, the Heat would need more first for the Giannis sweepstakes or any other big trade that they would want to do. So, why don't we can go one by one through these, right? So let's first talk about Bobby Portis because someone else, I think it was Pistons fan 11. Let's see Pistons fan 11 says Bobby Portis would be a great target as well. So let's just start there. Bobby Portis to the Pistons. How could that work and what would we think of it?
Yeah, Portis fits into the TPE. So super easy. Just send picks back. It'll take more than 2 probably because Portis is under contract. He's a good player still. His defense has slipped a little bit, but he's still good. I don't know that they'll do that.
He's under contract for a few more years, right?
Yeah, it's 2 more years after this, I think.
2 more? Okay.
At $13 million or something. So it's not a bad contract. I definitely could see the last year being a little rough with his age and kind of where he's at this point, but he's a good shooter, at least in the corners. And so it's a good backup for Tobias contingency, depending on the match, things like that. I don't think it's the best fit, right? He's a culture fit. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why he'd be fun to have, but from a basketball standpoint, he is a little redundant with Tobias, I think, and it may not be as much of a scoring floor as we'd like, but he can help with that when needed. So yeah, easy to do. I mean, every Giannis trade I've included is sending him back with Giannis because if you're sending Tobias out, I want Portis coming back with Giannis too, if you can. 5 seconds is maybe a little much, but I mean, 3 or 4 probably is what it would take if you're not giving a first for Bobby Portis. I think if you can in the deal you're describing, Cash Money, obviously that could all work as a 3-team with Portis and Norm coming to the Pistons and Giannis going to Miami and the Pistons sending out picks and things like it would probably be part of one big deal to be how the mechanics would look because salary matching is a little easier when you have that much salary going around. You get the higher percentage buffer, right? If you send 30 million out in salary, you can take back more than if it's 26 or whatever. So I think Norman Powell's a great like option 2 as a 2 guard. Like he's basically super powered Duncan, I guess, at this point. His defense might be worse. I mean, he just came out and was saying like, my defense has been bad, and I told Spo I need to get better. So that's not, not a great sign, but Pistons can probably cover that. So for a protected first, that's hard because then it locks up other firsts. So unless it's truly like it's top 4 protected, and if it doesn't convey, then we give you 2 seconds or 4 seconds. Like it would have to be that kind of protection where it doesn't eat into future years. That's how I would structure something like that for Norman Powell, who's also kind of getting old. So I like Norman Powell as a target. You can get him straight up for Karras, I think, from a salary matching standpoint. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to go get him if they want those extra firsts to go get Giannis.
So say the Pistons do acquire Bobby Portis into the TPE and don't send out any players in that deal. What would you think would be the most likely course of action then? Like, I'm assuming it would likely be cutting Isaac Jones, but the interesting part of it to me, and we're recording the day after the Pistons lost to the Suns, and Dennis Jenkins had a tough game, but we've talked a ton about, is Dennis Jenkins going to get an NBA deal? So would a situation like that potentially mess with, like if the Pistons are put in a position where they need to make moves to get back to 15 players, what do you think would be their most likely outcome, especially when you consider Dennis Jenkins into that equation?
Yeah, it definitely complicates the Dennis situation a little more than like if you're not sending out a 2-for-1 kind of situation or a 1-for-1. And so maybe that's where like you bring him back into the TPA and you send out like a Sasser or someone who's on the book for $5 million next year, but also seems to not have a role. So like moving him probably makes sense at some point, rather than just having that money sit on your books, unless you see him stepping up into a role. But you also have Klintman, who's got a non-guaranteed deal next year. So you could cut Klintman to convert Jenkins and then try to bring him back on a 2-way. You could, again, that goes back to, do you waive Ivy, right? Depending on, that would be wild. I hear how crazy it sounds. I'm not an Ivy hater. I've got the jersey. I love Ivy. I really wanted Ivy to be the guy. But right now, I just don't know. And again, it's not just me saying I don't like him. It's a somewhat informed opinion about what I think the front office is feeling. I'm not just pulling things out of the ether. I do have a little bit of, like, I'm not just making it up. I'll say not a lot, but it's not entirely uninformed. So I just think that's where it could be Ivy for Dennis. I mean, coach is already playing him. He's finally giving him those minutes. So like, it's not that crazy because if you're not going to sign him anyway, let him walk and go do that. So that's how it would play out, in my opinion.
So we kind of got a question here from Pistons fan 11 just about Dennis Jenkins. So, what is the options for Detroit, right? Obviously, they need to clear a roster spot somehow so that they can get the space to have Dennis Jenkins on a regular contract. But they've got a couple of options on the table for how they actually set up that contract. So what could they do with Dennis when they make that conversion, as we all expect and hope and want them to do?
Yep. So important thing to know is Dennis's last game that he can play is on the trade deadline day. It's on February 5th. He'll have reached his game max unless they don't make him active for a game in between then. But so he can play in that
perfectly.
I
don't know how they did that. I don't know how they did that, but they did it.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe it has to do with the NBAs. I don't know. But anyway, so he will be able to play on trade deadline day. So by the end of that day, before he has to play another game, they will know what their roster situation is. My sense, they'll probably try to do a 2-for-1, which is why they held on to Isaac Jones. Okay, so because one, it opened up more 2-way player things because there's an under 15. If you have less than 15 men on your roster, it limits your 2-way games, all that stuff. So by trade deadline day, we'll know. After that, he will get converted. He is going to get a standard contract after February 5th. Like, unless he blows his leg out by then, like, there's really, like, he is part of the rotation. So the
You
option
got any
is
wood
to-
around you to knock on after a comment like that, Kyle? I mean, I can see the cinder blocks behind you, but like, let's not speak that one into existence.
Yeah, for sure. So they can either convert him to a like automatic, like 1 year rest of the season minimum contract for the rookie scale minimum, and I think it's prorated. So that's one option. They can sign him using the minimum extension. So that's the first option is he doesn't have a say. It's automatic and there's no negotiation. It's just done prorated minimum for the rest of the year. He becomes a restricted free agent under the arenas provision because he's got 2 years of experience and he's a restricted free agent. So they have early bird rights on him, which allows them to sign him to, I think it's the starting salary of $13 million in the first year. It's like 4 years, like 60 million or 58 million is the max they can sign him for this summer. So that's one option. Then the other option is they can sign him to a minimum using the minimum exception. They can negotiate a contract, so they can do that up to 2 years. So it can be a 1+1, it can be a 2 year minimum. So they can negotiate for a veteran minimum, and he would have to agree to that. I don't think he would agree to a 1+1 minimum deal, especially knowing that he can get that this summer. Some teams like, oh yeah, he gets more guaranteed money, but sure, an extra $1 million might be a big deal, but knowing he could probably at least get that this summer, get your $1 million this year, and then sign for $60 million this summer, like, you know, they may not go that high, but I think they could give him a $10 million a year contract with the backup point guard like that. That's very well in the realm of possibility. Or they can use the biannual exception, and that's a up to 2 year deal. I think it's like for $12 million. It starts at $5.1 million, so they could get him on that for the rest of the year and next year if they wanted to. Again, he has to negotiate and agree to that, and then he'd still be a restricted free agent, and they'd still have his full bird rights, which lets them sign him for even more. So those are some options. But if they use the biannual exception, they lose that for next summer, and I think that's going to be important for them to have next summer to fill out the roster. And so I don't see the Pistons using that as an option. So my guess is he comes in and gets converted automatically or gets a veteran minimum for 1 year if it gives them a little more money, and then they'll go into free agency this offseason.
All right, real quick, Blake, just because I've seen this a couple times online, it's not the case that the Pistons can just like say, hey, Danis, we'd like to pay you, $14 million this year, and then have him signed for a 3-year contract or something. They're not allowed to do that until the offseason, right?
Yes. Yep. So that is they're limited to what they actually have access to because they're over the cap. They can't. So they have their exceptions, which is the minimum exception or the biannual they can use to sign him, or they can just convert him, the automatic conversion off of a 2-way that's already built into 2-way contracts. And then they can negotiate this summer with early bird rights or the following summer with full bird rights.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I feel like with Danis, the tough part is obviously he has that hot start to the year but still, even the recent, I guess, up and downness of the games, I feel like he deserves, and like you said, he has a clear role in this rotation. So I think it's probably likely that they're going to convert him, especially when you consider they literally can't play him for any more games after the trade deadline with the 2-way requirement. So yeah, maybe like you said, Klintman gets waived and then brought back on a 2-way. That seems like a likely outcome. You have Isaac Jones, who will probably either get sent out in a trade or can cut him loose after. But yeah, Danis is obviously going to get some run for this team. He's a true depth piece, and hopefully his play continues, like more so what it was at the start of the year. But yeah, I definitely see Danis getting some sort of full NBA deal once that requirement is reached and he doesn't have any more games left.
All right, so we got finally a Michael Porter Jr. trade. So we got, this one was from Greg on Twitter. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, guys. If you're live, you can see it here. Oh, nope, you can't. It just went away. Let me put that back and turn that dang setting off. Anyway, the whole core of that trade if this will ever work for me. The whole core of that trade is essentially a 3-team deal. Greg got creative, so the Pistons did not have to send out Tobias Harris in order to get back Michael Porter Jr. The Pistons did still send out, looks like 2 first-round picks in order to get him, and then you had as well, Karis LeVert, Paul Reed, Isaac Jones, Jaden Ivey heading on. So there's like, the bones of the deal, right? What would your opinion be of a Michael Porter Jr. type trade? And then 2, maybe a 3-team deal so that the Pistons wouldn't have to send out Tobias Harris.
Yeah, no, I'm pulling it up now so I can make sure I'm looking at it properly. Yeah, that's a lot of outgoing players for sure. So that's definitely the always the challenge with this is having a lot of outgoing. When you have too many players going out, it's just hard to make the roster spots work. Also, the Nets just drafted like 5 players in the most recent draft, so the number of players they want to just cut and waive is probably minimum.
Like 4 guards.
Right, exactly. So that's also all the let's send Ivy to the Nets. They'll want him. You can stop projecting that. Like the Nets don't want Jaden Ivey. They have enough other guys. Like they might take him, but it's not like they're coveting him as a swing piece. Okay. I think the Ivy to the Clippers is interesting. I think that's a team that could want him or could see him as a like a backup guy. To help with their bench unit once he kind of gets back to full strength. And so I think I put out a bunch of Ivy to the Clippers trades a couple weeks ago, just kind of seeing what would work. Because I think they're kind of a dark horse player for wanting him. But yeah, I mean, if you can do that to get MPG, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces here. So the Bogdanovich to the Nets will help. That helps the Clippers just get off some salary. Now it is a team option, so it's basically an expiring, and so that gives the Nets more salary to play with too for next summer. If they want to hold on to the team option just to get to the salary floor because they're gonna have a ton of cap space, or use him in a trade. That's the benefit of that because he's got a team option. Reed is also non-guaranteed, so it gives the Nets a lot of salary flexibility. I think it's probably a little light on first round picks for the Nets to pull the trigger on that. I think that's where I would say it falls short. They probably would want a first from Detroit. And what does that say? Is it Clippers? Oh, I see. Okay, so it's Detroit's first in 27. But the Clippers are getting a first as well.
Yeah, looked like it. Yeah, so the Clippers were getting a first as well. I believe it was a heavily protected one from Detroit.
Oh no, I think the Clippers are sending a protected first to the Nets. So that's where you get for Ivy and for Williams. So that's what that is. Okay, so no, that could work. I think that structure definitely could work for the Nets if they don't have any better offers for MPJ. They're getting 2 first round picks. They're getting tradable salary. I could see them doing that.
And real quick, since you mentioned, sorry to cut you off, Blake, but you mentioned like the Clippers maybe wanting Ivy. What would a Ivy to the Clippers deal look like? I mean, is it kind of a Bogdanovich thing? I guess maybe Derrick Jones Jr. could be interesting. Like, what are the range of salary players that the Pistons could get back in a deal like that?
A LeVert plus Ivy. That's the key to that. It gets you John Collins because LeVert plus Ivy is 24+ million, which means you can bring back 32-ish million in a trade. So that gives you a lot of range. And so that was kind of the things that I was looking at, was seeing if you could pry John Collins or flip John Collins to somewhere else to get MPJ or something like that. See if I can find any of my Clippers trades. The one I had, so I did have even just Jaden Ivey going out for Bogdanovich straight up with a couple second round picks and the Pistons getting a first round pick and Bogdanovich back. So that was one deal that I had. It's a 2029 pick. You're giving up 4 second-round picks and Jaden Ivey, and then getting back Bogdanovich. And so you have Bogdanovich with a team option, so that gives you more tradable salary to make a big swing this summer, plus another first-round pick to use in those deals, while turning one of your 12 second-round picks into a first-round pick. That was kind of a thought process, is if they want to get off Bogdanovich's salary, it saves them some money this year. I don't know if they would do that, but that's kind of one of the ideas. You'll love it. So John Collins and Bradley Beal coming back to the Pistons for Karis LeVert and Jaden Ivey. Pistons fans have been wanting Bradley Beal for ages, so now you finally get him. It's kind of you eat some salary on Beal for next year, and then you get Collins. But I think that was kind of before the Clips really started taking off again. So I don't think they're very inclined to trade John Collins right now. So that might be harder to do. So I think Bogdanovich is probably in the range of what you might get back if you want to have some more salary flexibility, because you can't trade Ivy for salary this summer. That was kind of the idea.
Yeah, I'm with you. Both with the MPJ trade, when I looked at that, I was like, the Nets are probably looking for numerous first-round picks for Michael Porter Jr. at this point, and are the Pistons picks valuable enough for them to take those over any other offers that are on the table? And then when you add the Clippers to it, how well they've been playing recently, I can only really see them dealing John Collins if it brings them back an upgrade, which I like the idea of Ivy to the Clippers. Like you mentioned, the Clippers have sort of initiated the Chris Dunn renaissance, and obviously a much better defender than Ivy is or probably ever will be. But I think that would be a good situation for Ivy. That's an interesting team that I didn't even think about, but it's probably unlikely at this point that you're going to get one of the Clippers key players back, even if they are interested in opening up that salary for next year.
All right, we got another one here from Rogue Blue, and this guy's last name always trips me up, so I'm gonna give it as best I can. But Justin Champagne. All right. In Washington right now, playing for the Wizards in 44 games, 7.6 rebounds. He's shooting about 50% from the floor, a little over 30% from three, 31% from three. So what about him as a target, Kyle?
Your 3-point percentage feels really low for that. I think here's the thing that I would say. The Pistons are super deep right now. They have too many guys that can use minutes. That doesn't mean they all need to play, and that's normal. It's good to have guys who can play on a moment's notice. But I don't know if they're going to make a lateral move to get another guy who adds depth that isn't a clear, this guy's an established player who can clearly come in and give us minutes. I think
guys that are deep depth pieces on bad teams, why would they come and be high-level role players on good teams? That's a great point. I don't think I've thought of it that way.
Right. And so I think that's where it's the other side of things, where the Pistons have enough depth where you can trade a few of those depth pieces, guys who aren't making a huge impact. That's why we can even entertain a LeVert conversation, right? One of our DPB's own tweeted out earlier, I think it was Brady, he was LeVert is when he's on, when he's off, it's all the same. It's okay, well, let's trade him then for someone who actually makes a difference when he's on or off the court. Even if it's I'd rather take a swing and get someone who could end up being bad. When on the court is that could potentially fill those holes, then we know he's not impacting anything. We're paying him $14 million to basically eat up minutes that we kind of want Danis to be playing anyway to get more consistency. So you got to take the toy away from the coach. I think that's part of the appeal of a LeVert trade as well. Yeah,
with the Champagne of it, I'm could we get his brother from San Antonio? That's not going to happen. Julian is shooting 37% from deep this season and is a huge player for the Spurs, but they're not going to give him up. And I think either of Julian would have a bigger role with this team, but if you bring in Justin, you're probably looking at overlap with Javonte Green, and Javonte Green has been solid in his role so far this year. So, I mean, it's great to have depth if injuries come up or whatever it might be. And if you're in a situation where nothing else is really going on at the deadline and some team just needs you to take one of these contracts and you think it's a player that can fit into the rotation somehow or just give you end of the bench depth, like I see that being not like a last resort because we sort of saw the Pistons do that last year. Um, but it could maybe be a name like a Justin Champagnie or someone else that is under the radar that we're not thinking about that could just be depth for the playoffs, even though it is a very deep team already, like you said. And I just have to point out, I love this take from Pistons fan 11 with all the chatter around the Nets scouts being at Little Caesars Arena for the Nets games. Like, yeah, they were probably there just to get a bobblehead.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
I mean, that's what I would do. I'd go to great lengths to go get a bobblehead. I'm already an NBA scout, and I can go get like a Cade bobblehead. Oh, come on, yeah, for sure. But in all seriousness, let's end on this one because we've been talking about specific names, right? I know Rogue Go Blue just brought up Dean Wade from the Cavs. I don't know if they'd really be interested in moving him, but like that'd be another one too to watch. But Camille had a great question right at the start. He just said, "How can Trajan Langdon strengthen the roster without disrupting it?" So then after the trade deadline, based on that sort of thought process, what players do you actually expect to no longer be in Detroit, Kyle? I think we can wrap it up on there to get just kind of the high level overview and give everyone a little last second preview. Here's trade deadline's coming up. It's Wednesday, right?
Yes. Yeah. February 5th. I think it's at 3 p.m., maybe 4 p.m. Yeah. So it's close. It's drawing near. Yeah. I think LeVert's illness is very conspicuous. I'll just say it that way, or at least suspicious. And so I think, well, I don't know if I should say I expect him not to be on the roster, but I would, if I had to say, it's more likely than not. I think LeVert is sent out in a package for something. I think both him and Duncan were signed for the purpose of being traded. Duncan has proven to be too invaluable at this point to trade him, so he's not going anywhere. And I think LeVert hasn't really given what they need. And if Danis can give him 80% of what LeVert's doing at 10% of the cost, okay, that's a pretty easy math to do. Sasser is a guy who's not getting much run, and he's on the books for next year for $5 million. He's another guy. I don't know they might not do that this at the deadline, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets sent away this summer if it's not at the deadline, because that $5 million is probably not doing much with the guys you have. So yeah, I think LeVert's the big one. I think Ivy. I genuinely believe that Ivy will not be on this roster come March. I'll just put it that way. I just think that's where things are at this point. And so I hope that they're able to swing and send Ivy and LeVert out for a forward or something along those lines in terms of salary that they can get. So that's kind of my hope. Ivy, I wouldn't surprise me if Ivy's around, but I think if I'm having to take a stand just to, do it, I would say Ivy and LeVert both are gone to bring some balance to the roster.
So I feel like when Tobias Harris signed that 2-year, $52 million deal, we were all circling this trade deadline as like Tobias Harris is going to be sent out and the Pistons are going to take a big swing. They were in the position to do that, but how good the team has been and how good Tobias has been, it seems like we're just going to ride that contract out, which I'd say is a win for Trajan Langdon as he's like stepping into the front office role at that point when he made that deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think he, I think he just brings a lot to the team, culture-wise. Yes, he's on and off on the basketball court. But that's always been Tobias. Like he'll average 16 points a night, but it's because he gives you 25 one night and he gives you 12 another night. Like, or Wes, the economist, he can tell you if that's the right numbers. But like like that's always kind of been his way. And so nothing's about this is surprising the front office. None of it's surprising the coaching staff. Like that's how Tobias is. And so, I think if they use him, that's great. He'll probably come back anyway and sign a minimum. He wants to be in Detroit. That's been clear. I hope he doesn't. I don't know that they need to. I don't know if there's people out there that are worth trading Tobias and what else it will take to get him for now. This summer, let's revisit that. We can come back to that. But I do think a few tweaks here or there will make a difference on whether this team actually gets through the Eastern Conference or not.
All right, you guys, you heard it here first on the Pindown. Tobias Harris is the most consistent, inconsistent player in the NBA. Most consistent roller coaster stability, veteran stability, while also giving you tons of variance on the scoring. That's very true. Kyle, appreciate you coming on as always, man. Could you let the people know where they can find what you're working on and just where they can go and talk with you about all this cap knowledge that you got with the Pistons?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter or X, depending on your affiliations. But I think Kyle Metz 23. And that's mostly where I do stuff. I do contribute at DBB, Detroit Bad Boys, often. And even if I'm not the one writing the article, usually I'm poking my head in other people's work to make sure the numbers are right. And so you'll find stuff there. I sometimes live in the comments there. So, but mostly on Twitter. So you can come yell at me and tell me I'm an Ivy hater and all that other stuff. So,
oh man, Kyle, thank you so much for joining. We'll see what happens less than a week from now at the trade deadline. And thanks for everyone who joined us in the chat, or if you're listening, post once we have the recording up on the DBB Pindown podcast feed. Reminder, anyone can call our phone line to ask a question and hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to Sean Corp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys for all the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.